Welcome back. This week we're going to go with Kelly Galloup's Conehead Wooly Sculpin. We're going to be tying this one in olive today. This is a single hook pattern. It's going to be on a Dai-Riki 710 size 2. And we got a large tungsten gold bead on the front. We're going to do this with the original body. We'll speak to that as we get going on this fly. But to start out, we're just going to go right back to the gouge of the hook, and we're going to leave our thread right there, advance forward just a little bit, and we're going to tie in our tail. The tail is just going to be 2 stacked Marabou plumes and olive. And go ahead and get this selected. Peel back the junk that you're not going to use. And then we're going to measure this out the length of the hook. Get that tied in. And then take this, just retain this for bulk. Just retain this for bulk. It's going to help with your taper. For the body, we're going to be using just regular chenille. And then we're going to take this and we're going to leave it, there's probably 1/8 of an inch right there where I left off with my thread. I'm not going to advance any further, and that's just going to be a solid reference point to where I know I want all my material to end right there. This pattern right here, you know, I mean, and I'm guilty of this more than anybody. I'm sure of it. It's so easy to want to continually go with the big articulated stuff. It's so fun to watch it swim in the water. I mean, you do catch some big fish on this articulated stuff. You get some really good eats, some really good chases. But there are times when the articulated stuff just doesn't work. You know, sometimes you get those really bright sunny days and it's really tough to get a good chase or a good follow, and you know, they switch to this small stuff and almost instantly there you go. I mean, you're into fish. So it's good to tie and carry these things when we're on the boat, especially. I have an entire box labeled singles, and I go through, you know, typically I do start out with the articulated stuff. I do, but I will go through. If I'm really struggling, I'll scale it down. I'll go with the small stuff, whether it be, you know, Wooly Sculpin, a cougar, the dink, whatever it may be, smoke wagon. I will scale them down and fish the small stuff, and it seems like you will want, on the days the articulated stuff doesn't pick stuff up, don't be afraid to go with something smaller. I mean, I know it's not as fun to fish, but not as fun to see them in the water, but there's no denying their effectiveness. We're going to get this second plume now that I did my little rant about fishing the smaller stuff and not being stubborn like me all the time. We're going to get that second plume tied in right over the top there. You have a nice big wispy tail, a little bit of internal flash, and then I'm just going to take this right up to my thread and we'll trim this off. Get that cleaned up just slightly, and then I'm going to advance my thread. I'm going to tie in this wire, and then I'm going to hook it. And I'll flip this around so you can see what I mean. The wire's right there. I'm just going to flip this around. I'm going to hook this and then catch it with my thread and secure it in. And that just ensures when I go wrapping this thread to capture the hackle that I'm not going to pull it out and have it slipping on me and then have nothing to tie my hackle down with. So next thing we're going to take is just a card of of chenille. Kelly started tying these with like the cactus chenille, and you can use the ice dub if you want. We're just gonna go with the regular chenille on this one. We'll have this one as close to original as possible, and we'll go ahead and get that tied in. Take this right to my reference point with thread, and then we're gonna just start wrapping our body. So I'm going to go one wrap right in front of that tail, and I'm going to pinch and anchor it. 3 or 4 wraps, we're going to pinch and anchor. Same thing. Don't worry too much about your spacing at first, because we're going to come back through this and we're just going to build our body just slightly. We'll probably take this back to the 3/4 point, and then we'll bring it back forward. And all this is doing is just building a little bit of bulk, giving you a little bit of extra taper on your body. That's all we're after. So we'll go ahead and tie that off, and you'll notice I'm getting pretty close to the cone head, and that's by design, really. I mean, you don't want a ton of space, because this cone is actually part of the head, and if you leave a ton of space, you're still going to have your deer hair that we'll tie in here in a little bit, and your head's going to wind up being unproportional to the rest of the fly. So honestly, I mean, it's about 1/8 of an inch. By the time we tie our collar in, we'll do a stack of deer hair on the top and bottom. That's going to be it. That, and the more deer hair you have, you're going to mess with your flotation. So it'll be a little bit more buoyant if you have a lot of compressed deer hair in there. So what we're going to do now is go to our olive brown saddle hackle. Knock some tools over in the process. And if I can, usually on the saddle hackle you can get away with it, getting some of this little webby stuff in there, as long as your stem isn't too thick. The Schlappen tends to have a little bit thicker of a stem toward the bottom, so it looks like we're going to be able to get away with this. It's still a pretty flexible stem. So I'm just going to take this and we're going to tie that in, and then trim off this excess. Half hitch, and then we're going to wrap this back just like we do with all of the patterns that have the Schlappen or the saddle in there, and then we're going to counter wrap it with our wire. Go ahead and get one. If you can, get 2 good wraps up in the front. It just kind of fills that body out a little bit. It just gives it a little bit of extra bulk. I like the way that it looks. And then we're going to counter wrap this with our yellow wire, and we're just going to rip this straight through. There we go. That's looking pretty solid. Pretty solid, and our spacing should be just about right here. We'll see. You'll be able to see a lot better once I get the deer hair and everything in here, with the spacing that we have between our cone head and the body, and it shouldn't be too awful much deer hair. That thing looks like it's pointing straight down. Now I'm checking the monitor. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Alright. Wish I would have caught that earlier. It probably looked off. But let's see, the next thing we're going to do, I have some deer hair already in here and pre-stacked for our collar. And you want a good thick collar on these. You don't want a real thin collar. It's just going to look lost on the fly. So if you think you have enough deer hair, take a little bit extra. Do yourself a favor and make it a nice thick collar. And we're going to take this back probably 3/4 of the way. We'll go between the point of the hook and the barb, and that's where we're going to want this to let off. So we're going to measure that out, and then the next thing we're going to do is just take this deer hair and we're going to give this a nice flush cut. And this is the only portion that we're going to tie in. This is strictly a collar. It's not going to be used as part of the head. Strictly a collar. Go ahead and get this one loose wrap. Get all of your stuff captured. Get all of your material captured. Second loose wrap, start working your thread in there a little bit more. And then a third, really pull down on this. You can go ahead and spread your collar out a little bit. You'll get that nice half moon effect that we're after. And then you can really go ahead and wrench down on that. Be careful if you're using this gel spun, you will cut right through some of those fibers if you really pinch down on it. But there you can see we have that nice half moon effect that we're after on this pattern. We don't have any deer hair floating underneath, and that's going to really help with how this thing tracks in the water. It's going to act like kind of a prop and keep you in a nice horizontal retrieve. Now the last thing that we're going to do with this is, you can see all the more space that's there. I mean, you can barely see it, but that's by design. Like I said earlier, you don't want your head to be so big on this that it takes away from the proportion on your fly. That was one thing that I did when I tied this. When I first started learning how to tie this pattern with the Conehead, I'd always have it. It just looked off. I mean, it was so long, and it just didn't sink as quick as I would have liked it to, and it just didn't work. It really didn't. So I finally learned that you can rush this right up against the. You can rush this right up against the bead. Leave yourself enough room to where your thread and everything's going to be able to sink in there, and your hair's going to flare still, but not so much room that you have to stack so much deer hair in there that you wind up taking a quarter of your hook for the head. Rambling on like crazy here. Rambling on. So that one spun a little bit to my side and a little bit to the camera side, as you can see. Another thing that I'm going to say on this is, when you take your material, find your halfway point on the usable material. You can see we already clipped this off right there. Find your halfway point on that, and that's where you want to tie this in. If you go tying in one way or the other, especially if you get more toward the front, that hair's not as hollow, so it's not gonna want to flare for you as well as it should. There we go. We got a little bit kicking out to the side there, but that's fine. We're gonna rectify that. Oh, it's starting to get windy out there. The season's changing here in Montana. It's starting to get windy. We're going to go ahead and whip finish this. And then the very last thing that we're going to do is we're going to take and trim this deer hair right along our cone. So we're just going to follow the path of this cone and push right through to your collar. It's rain out there too. Haven't seen much of that this year. Same thing on the underneath side. Just follow the pattern that your cone already has for you, and just push right back with your razor. Get this trimmed up here pretty quickly. somewhat quick. And you can do this pattern with without the cone as well. You can do this one without the cone. A lot of times, you know, Kelly has a video out. He did one, I think, last winter, where he did the Wooly Sculpin, and he did it without the cone. So it's just kind of like a cougar style head. And that's a very effective pattern as well. This one will give you a little bit more of a jig action if you want to do that. Good on a lateral retrieve as well. Just trying to get this trimmed up here. Just trying to get this trimmed. There it is. That's going to be the gist of it right there. You can see I could take this back just a little bit right here, but I don't want to get too close to that collar. So what I'll wind up doing is I'll go through and I'll do some scissor work on this and really clean that up. But it looks like my collar shifted on me just slightly. There we go. We're back to that nice half moon again. Things look pretty good. It did shift on me a little bit. But I still have a few things, like I was saying, I still have a few things on there that I need to trim up and I need to clean up a little bit, but I'm not going to, I mean, you get the overall gist of what we're after on this. Before I take the picture, it'll be all good and clean as usual. But that's Kelly Galloup's Conehead Wooly Sculpin. If you guys have any questions or comments on this one, I got deer hair in my nose. Any questions or comments, as always, on this one, leave them with me and I'll get back to you as quick as I can. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you on the next fly.